Rich Forrester's latest declaration of love came not with one of his signature grand gestures, but with a quieter, unexpectedly tender resolve that shook the foundations of every relationship orbiting him. In the soft glow of the Forrester mansion's evening lights, he told Taylor Hayes that the time had come to stop dreaming and start planning, and in an instant the legendary psychiatrist, who had spent years oscillating between hope and heartbreak, felt the ground beneath her steadied by something that finally resembled permanence. From that moment the pair began spinning fantasies into tangible tasks, guest lists drafted on napkins, venues compared against the memories of long-ago aspen boughs, and color palettes debated with the jovial intensity of teenagers picking out prom night hues. Ridge insisted on a ceremony that mirrored the serenity of their favorite mountain trails. Taylor, ever the realist when crises arise, outlined contingencies for storms, paparazzi ambushes, and family feuds flaring mid-aisle. Yet for every logistical challenge one proposed, the other answered with the same refrain, "We face it together." That mantra became the heartbeat of their planning sessions, each beat echoing louder through the Forrester corridors and inevitably reverberating inside Brooke Logan's bruised heart. Brooke had always believed her love story with Ridge was an epic that would bend but never break. That every detour into Taylor's arms was a pre-written chapter designed only to prove how unshakable the bridge endgame truly was. But as she watched Ridge lean closer to Taylor rather than fall back into old patterns of uncertainty, she realized the detours might have become the destination. The startling sight of him grinning down at Taylor's left hand as they whispered about ring designs shifted Brooke's world off its axis, and the initial sting of jealousy morphed swiftly into a more corrosive fear that her own sense of destiny had been a self-spun illusion. She could have ignored the ache by diving headfirst into a new fashion line or jetting to Milan for a last-minute preview, but reminders of the upcoming wedding stalked her at every turn. Hope excitedly discussing bridesmaid fabrics, Steffi politely asking whether she would feel comfortable attending, and even Donna cautiously broaching whether Brooke wanted to help plan a surprise pre-wedding brunch. Each reminder chipped away at the composure she projected, until one late night she found herself alone in her kitchen, clutching a half-empty glass of Cabernet and muttering arguments to an invisible Ridge about all the reasons he still belonged with her. In that unguarded moment she imagined barging into the ceremony to be held, rumor said, in the same garden where Ridge had once sworn eternal devotion to her fatherless soul, and publicly demanding he rethink vows that were, in her view, born of exhaustion, not enlightenment. But even as she rehearsed the speech, Brooke's conscience fired flare after flare. Such an interruption would earn pity at best, scorn at worst, and would do nothing to heal the raw, widening tear in her own heart. Facing the inevitability of Ridge's new chapter, she finally admitted to herself and to Hope during a tear-stained mother-daughter confession that perhaps she had mistaken habit for destiny, comfort for cosmic design. Hope, ever the diplomat, pressed her mother not to slip into despair, citing the Logan resilience that had carried them through scandal after scandal. Nevertheless, the quiet between them when the conversation ended felt like the hush after a church bell signals the end of a funeral. Into that silence strode Nick Marone, the one-time sea captain, business mogul, and perpetual rogue had been away from Los Angeles long enough for memories of his gravel-voiced laughter to register like half-remembered lyrics. He arrived on May 13th. Stepping onto Forrester territory with the same unapologetic swagger that once made Brooke dizzy and Ridge livid. Word ran through the fashion house like wildfire. Nick was back, looking as though years at sea had carved his features into sharper definition and his convictions into unshakable granite. When Ridge heard, he scoffed that Nick's timing was nothing more than opportunistic meddling. Taylor privately wondered whether the universe was testing Ridge's resolve. Brooke, upon first sight of him in Il Giardino's courtyard, felt the strangest mixture of déjà vu and relief. Their reunion unfolded not as a tempest of pent-up longing, but as a calm, deeply honest conversation over coffee that turned into wine and then into a moonlit walk along the Santa Monica Pier. Brooke confessed her humiliation at realizing she had misread every sign Ridge sent, and Nick, in a gesture so uncharacteristically gentle that it startled her, admitted he too had once clung to shipwrecked dreams long after the tide pulled them out of reach. He told her that some loves are hurricanes, tearing through towns and leaving only the strongest foundations standing. Others are steady lighthouses, guiding weary sailors back to themselves. For years Brooke had mistaken the storm for safety. His words landed with the resonance of gospel, and for the first time she allowed herself to envision a future in which her fulfillment was not tethered to Ridge's whims, but anchored to her own sense of worth. The next evening she met Nick again, and what began as gratitude bloomed into a spark both familiar and startlingly new. Familiar because their chemistry was an old song that required no rehearsal. New because both had endured enough heartache to sing it with wiser harmonies. Nick's return gave Brooke more than companionship, it gave her permission to rediscover the parts of herself that existed before rivalry defined her days. She laughed without calculating Ridge's reaction, flirted without fearing public opinion, and when she confessed she still winced at the idea of attending the wedding, Nick offered to be her escort. A shield against prying eyes and a reminder that she was not the abandoned half of a broken pair, but a whole woman embarking on her own expedition. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations surged forward amid Forrester-level flare UPS. Steffi fought to balance enthusiasm for her father's happiness with empathy for Brooke, whom she had battled yet also grown to respect. Thomas channeled his energy into designing a minimalist bridal gown that would drape Taylor in serenity, though whispers among interns claimed he was secretly adding symbolic stitching meant to warn Ridge against repeating old mistakes. Eric, ever the patriarch, tried to broker harmony by hosting family dinners at which conversation topics were restricted to neutral ground. But even he could not prevent Pam from expressing worry that honey-glazed lemon bars at the reception might attract uninvited bees. Her metaphor for Brooke stung everyone who recognized it. The tension culminated one afternoon when Ridge and Brooke crossed paths in the CEO office. She congratulated him with a tremulous sincerity. He thanked her, guilt flickering across his gaze. They both sensed that this farewell, unspoken yet final, was more definitive than any prior separation. Later that night Ridge shared the encounter with Taylor, and she, keenly aware of Brooke's resilience, asked whether he feared one last-minute plea. Ridge answered that even if Brooke tried, his commitment to Taylor would not waver. And Taylor chose to accept his certainty rather than interrogate every shadow of doubt. Still, destiny in Los Angeles rarely follows linear lines. And on the morning of the rehearsal dinner, a rumor erupted that Brooke had booked a private jet to Italy, the same spontaneous flight path she had once taken with Ridge after a terse argument with Taylor. Paparazzi speculated she intended to whisk Ridge away for nostalgia's sake. Fans on social media debated whether the Logan Forrester saga was about to loop back upon itself, and Ridge momentarily feared history might repeat. Yet hours later Brooke strolled into the rehearsal arm-in-arm with Nick, radiating poise. She approached Taylor first, congratulated her warmly, thanked her for years of shared motherhood, and promised no interference. Taylor, moved by the sincerity in Brooke's eyes, recognized an olive branch and accepted it. Ridge watched, astonished, as Brooke turned next to him, offered a courteous smile, and then returned her full attention to Nick. In that instant it dawned on him that the woman who had once defined his identity no longer revolved around him. She had resumed her own orbit. That realization flooded him with relief and sorrow in unequal measure, but he swallowed both emotions and raised a toast to new beginnings. The day of the wedding dawned clear. Malibu surf pounding a rhythmic blessing against the shoreline estate chosen for the ceremony. Guests arrived in whispers of silk and bursts of flash photography. Donna nudged Katie, marveling that no last-minute chaos had derailed the day. Carter prepared vows that would legalize a union 30 years in the making, while Ridge stood beneath an arch of white bougainvillea, awaiting Taylor's entrance. Brooke watched from a seat beside Nick, her heart surprisingly steady. When the string quartet shifted into the processional and Taylor appeared, sunlight cascading through her veiled curls, Brooke felt an echo of grief, but it did not swallow her. Instead, it drifted away like smoke in ocean wind. The ceremony unfolded without sabotage, objections, or fainting spells. Ridge and Taylor exchanged promises that recognized past ruptures, yet affirmed an unbreakable commitment to present harmony. As Carter pronounced them husband and wife, applause thundered. And Ridge drew Taylor into a kiss that felt both brand new and centuries old. Cameras flashed, petals rained. And over the roar of celebration, Brooke heard Nick whisper that sometimes surrendering one dream is merely clearing space for the next. She placed her hand upon his and realized that statement was not a consolation, but a declaration of possibility. By nightfall, the reception swirled with dancing, laughter, and the kind of cross-family mingling that once seemed unattainable. Ridge invited Brooke to share one brief, respectful dance, and during that gentle sway they acknowledged that their story, though over in the romantic sense, remained an epic of shared children, intertwined histories, and lessons learned. They parted with genuine smiles, each walking toward the person now holding center stage in their separate futures, Taylor for Ridge, Nick for Brooke. As moonlight shimmered across the Pacific and the newlyweds departed for a private honeymoon retreat, Brooke and Nick slipped away down to the beach, there, barefoot in the cooling sand. They spoke not of what had been lost, but of voyages ahead, charity initiatives Nick wished to bankroll, environmental campaigns Brooke longed to front, and the tantalizing possibility of exploring those ventures together. When Nick finally pulled her into a lingering kiss, the surf crashed like a cymbal in approval. Far above them, the Forrester estate lights dimmed, signaling an end to one celebration and the beginning of uncountable untold chapters. In this single night, the axis of the bold and the beautiful world had shifted. Ridge and Taylor embarked on a long-awaited adventure of marital solidarity, while Brooke and Nick rediscovered a compass pointing toward horizons neither had dared imagine alone. And so, with hearts recalibrated and destinies realigned, the saga pressed forward, proof that even in a landscape famous for recycle romance and cyclical heartbreak, authentic transformation can erupt like dawn over the Pacific, irrevocably bright and endlessly new. Liam Spencer entered the week of May 5th with the unsteady gait of a man who had spent every waking second fighting a private war inside his own skull. And as each sunrise melted into the next sleepless night, he felt the ticking clock of his inoperable brain tumor grow louder, almost taunting him with reminders that tomorrows were no longer guaranteed. The denial that once shored up his resolve, those stubborn daydreams in which a miracle surgeon would appear out of nowhere or a clinical trial would surface at the 11th hour, had cracked beneath relentless waves of headaches, blurred vision, and the memory of that traumatic collapse that first sent him spiraling into emergency surgery. In the immediate aftermath, he had convinced himself that surviving the hemorrhage meant beating the odds. Now, with scans displaying the unmistakable shadow of a mass no scalpel could reach, he finally faced what every specialist had repeated in gentle but unflinching tones. This was a battle he could ease, but not win. Steffi Forrester, who had hovered at his bedside through the worst of his postoperative delirium and witnessed the moment neurosurgeons admitted defeat, sensed the shift in him before he voiced it. She saw it in the way he lingered by Kelly's door at night, as though memorizing every detail of his daughter's sleeping face. She heard it in the cracks between his words when he tried to discuss mundane topics like school carpools and summer camp schedules. On Monday, she pressed him harder than ever to share the truth. reminding him that secrets rot from the inside, and that Hope deserved to know, not just for her own heart, but so she could help reassure Beth when questions inevitably arose. Liam's first instinct was to shield Hope from the weight of his mortality. He pictured her eyes widening in disbelief, her voice quavering as she argued that love conquers statistics, yet Steffi's plea cut through his protective reflexes. She wisely pointed out that postponing pain did not spare loved ones. It simply concentrated the anguish into a narrower window. By Tuesday, the burden had grown so heavy that even Liam's trademark optimism failed him, and during a quiet moment on the Cliff House deck, waves crashing like a countdown below, he asked Steffi to be present when he broke the news to Hope. The confession itself shattered the illusion Hope had willed into existence ever since doctors reluctantly allowed Liam to return home, an illusion that rest and medication would somehow coax the swell away and reveal nothing more sinister. Hope's tears slid down her cheeks in silent rivulets as Liam admitted the tumor's location made surgery impossible and that radiation offered no curative promise, only the hope of buying weeks, maybe months of relative clarity. She wanted to bargain, to toss out the names of famous clinics she had researched in sleepless desperation. But the exhausted sorrow in Liam's eyes told her he had already run those races in his mind and found them leading back to the same finish line. The revelation triggered a chain reaction that could not be contained within the walls of one living room. Hope reached out to Brooke for maternal strength. Steffi called Finn to update him on the emotional aftermath. And in a rare moment of mutual support, the two women who had spent years vying for Liam's heart found themselves united in an unspoken vow to grant him peace. Yet a crucial piece of the puzzle remained unsettlingly absent. Bill, Liam's father, still believed that their strained relationship could be repaired later, whenever tempers cooled and schedules aligned. He had no inkling that later might not exist. Wednesday found Liam staring at his phone, thumb hovering over the call button, replaying the last conversation they'd had, terse words about corporate priorities, Bill's frustration that Liam had sidelined Spencer Publications' duties while convalescing, Liam's curt retort that family sometimes outweighed profit. The silence that followed had stretched for weeks, a chasm wide enough to swallow forgiveness. Now time's ruthless pruning shears snipped away the luxury of pride, leaving raw necessity. Bill had to know. Not only so father and son could reconcile, but so Bill could prepare to guide Kelly and Beth through an inevitable storm. Still, fear not at Liam. Fear that Bill would react with misplaced fury at the doctors. Fear that his father's instinct to bulldoze obstacles with money would clash with the immutable facts of terminal illness. Fear that Bill might crumble in a way Liam was too weak to manage. Steffi sensed the hesitation and urged him toward courage, reminding him that withholding truth would haunt him far more than any tears he might trigger. By Thursday, Liam resolved to face his father, arranging a private meeting at the Spencer Publications penthouse on May 9th, a date that loomed both dread-soaked and strangely liberating. The hours leading up to that confrontation unfolded like a cinematic montage of memories. Liam pictured Bill teaching him to sail off Catalina Island, Bill embracing him after the birth of his granddaughters, Bill's proud grin the day Liam first stepped into an executive office. Those flashes of paternal devotion tempered the recollection of betrayals and power plays, proving the bond between them, however battered, remained unbreakable. When Friday arrived, the penthouse felt cavernous, all polished steel and glass, reflecting a skyline that seemed to pulse with the same urgency thrumming through Liam's veins. Bill entered carrying the armor of corporate confidence, expecting based on cryptic text message, wording to referee yet another argument about business direction. His guard rose the moment he noticed Liam's pallor and the subtle tremor in his son's hands. The father opted for humor. A jab about how Liam's fashionably rumpled look still needed Spencer brand polish, but the joke drifted like smoke when Liam's expression stayed solemn. Tension tightened the air as Liam began with an apology for their last heated exchange, for every delay in returning calls, for the worry he was about to plant in Bill's heart. The mention of a collapse and emergency surgery jolted Bill back a step, his eyes flaring with a mix of disbelief and anger at being left in the dark. As Liam walked him through the timeline, fainting spell, ambulances, scans. The words inoperable tumor delivered beneath unforgiving fluorescent lights. Bill's face drained of color until even the tan that years on yachts had etched across his skin seemed to fade. The revelation detonated the fragile equilibrium between them. Bill's first response was fury at the medical team for deeming any condition untreatable. Fury at Steffi for shouldering the secret alone. Fury at himself for letting petty quarrels steal irreplaceable days from his son. He paced the length of the room, phone in hand, firing off commands to locate globally renowned oncologists, to charter flights to Switzerland, to secure consultations at Mayo and Johns Hopkins and obscure facilities rumored to test revolutionary gene therapies. Liam watched the maelstrom unfold until dizziness forced him to sink onto the leather sofa, and only then did Bill notice how the exertion of merely standing left his son winded. The sight cracked Bill's formidable facade. Voice breaking, he knelt before Liam and promised to deploy every cent of the Spencer empire to turn statistics into dust. That plea opened the floodgates of truth Liam had rehearsed. That money could buy more opinions, not more time. That quality of life mattered now more than experimental gambles. That he needed Bill not as a savior, but as a father willing to sit beside him as the horizon drew closer. The rawness of that request stunned Bill into stillness. All the empire builder instincts collapsed under the simple human terror of losing a child. In the hush that followed, father and son locked eyes, and years of rivalry, misunderstanding, and mismanaged love melted away. Bill gathered Liam into an embrace fierce enough to anchor them both, whispering promises that he would stay, that he would listen, that no matter how short the road ahead they would walk it together. The confrontation, once bristling with unresolved grievances, transformed into a heartbreaking communion as Liam outlined tasks he had only dared scribble in a notebook, letters he hoped Bill would deliver to Kelly and Beth on future birthdays, charitable causes he wished the company would continue funding, personal apologies he needed to voice before fatigue stole speech. Bill took mental note of every request, tears unapologetically tracking down his face, then countered with vows of his own that Spencer Publications would establish scholarships in Liam's name, that every sailing trip they'd postponed would happen in accelerated form, that he would carry Liam's story into boardrooms and share price graphs to remind ruthless tycoons that vulnerability lives even in titans. By late afternoon the sun slanted through the penthouse windows, turning dust motes into bits of gold that drifted around them like silent applause. Hope arrived to retrieve Liam, bracing for an atmosphere thick with accusation, but she found father and son seated side by side on the terrace, their conversation subdued, yet strangely luminous. Bill rose to greet her, brushing at eyes still red, and assured her that from this moment forward they would function as an unbreakable front. Hope thanked him, and for the first time since the nightmare began, she glimpsed a form of strength that was not born of denial, but of unified resolve. Liam, exhausted yet lighter, whispered gratitude to Steffi via text for pushing him toward this confession. Steffi replied with a simple heart emoji, knowing words were unnecessary. As evening settled over Los Angeles, Liam returned to the Cliff House where Steffi, Finn, and the children awaited with a quiet dinner aimed at normalcy. Meanwhile, Bill remained on his terrace long after city lights flickered on, contemplating the vast skyline like an adversary he now intended to wrestle for every extra sunrise his son could witness. He understood, perhaps more acutely than ever, that wealth could not bend biology, but he also grasped that his greatest currency lay in love amplified investing time, presence, and storytelling into the legacy Liam would leave behind. The bold and the beautiful's coming days promised no miracle cures, yet in the wake of that brutal honesty a new narrative emerged, one where secrets surrendered to transparency, where fractured bonds healed under deadline, and where even the most powerful man in town faced the humbling truth that some battles are not meant to be won but to be walked hand in hand until the finish.